Hello, Eben.
Hello, Bob.
Uh, it's Friday, January 10th, 2025. We have a new year. We had a program yesterday that got interrupted due to electrical problems. I am in an office of Inside the Vatican magazine in Front Royal, Virginia, and you are in the capital city of Hungary, Budapest, which I guess they call Budapest.
That's right.
And you are also a Viking, as I call you, from the northern part of Europe, Denmark, from Copenhagen, one of the most astute observers of modern trends, and particularly religious and spiritual matters. And you've come down to Budapest and you found yourself working there for some months now. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you find Budapest?
Oh, it's a very vibrant city, and compared to other European cities, here there is still an idea or some kind of vision, I would say, that Christianity is important for society and that Western civilization is founded on Christianity, and we should do everything we can to preserve it. So the government is doing a lot to promote, I would say, the strengthening of the Christian civilization. I think the Hungarian people is a different story. I think people here are just as secular as anywhere else in Europe. But I think the big difference between, like secular people in Germany or the United Kingdom or in the Nordic countries in Scandinavia, where I come from myself, is that they still believe it's very important and they support it, even though they might not practice and go to church every Sunday, they would still support the strengthening of the Christian culture. So in that sense, Hungary sticks out. It's a different country from many other European countries. And of course, being a practicing Catholic, it's interesting to be here because it attracts a lot of other, Catholics from around the world. I have many colleagues here or other, people who are fellows, visiting fellows at different organizations or institutions that are Catholic and very practicing. So I think it is attracting a lot of people. And now with Trump in office as the new president, everybody here is talking about that there will be, a lot of strengthening between or strengthening the bonds between Hungary and the United States, because it seems that Trump is very much in favor of Mr. Orban, the prime minister here. And I think he even said that it was his favorite country. Hungary was his favorite country, and Orban was his favorite president, and it would be the first country he would visit, as a president on this in his second term here. So let's wait and see. Everybody here thinks that there will be a lot of traffic now between the U.S. and Hungary because of Trump and because this is a conservative Christian culture in
Mhm.
a very secular Europe.
Okay, so we're starting this podcast beginning of 2025, and we're looking at many changes with the election of Donald Trump in the United States. The president will be the elected president will be installed on the 20th of January, so in 10 days. 3 days ago, on Tuesday, January 7th, he said that he would propose that the United States take over the island of Greenland, which is under the control and under the property of Denmark. And we started to talk about this yesterday, and then you said there's even more changes in the last 24 hours. But what is this all about, that Trump thinks the United States should take over Greenland?
Yeah, let me start by saying that Greenland and the Faroe Islands and Denmark is like in one kingdom. And our history with Greenland goes back 300 years. So, I mean, there has been a huge Danish impact on the Greenland culture. And I think that's very important to know. It's just not something that happened yesterday. It's a very long history we have. And it was also a Danish pastor that was, evangelizing, making Greenlanders become Christians and things like that. So there are quite tight bonds. But the problem here is, of course, that we have a new political situation in the Arctic Circle. And Russia and China has its borders, or at least Russia has, up to the Arctic Circle. And now it seems that it's very important to secure this area. You need more surveillance with the airspace and things like that. So in that sense, I would say that Trump has a point. You need a bigger country with a bigger military, with more financial resources to back Greenland in this situation. And when Trump said, I mean, it was last time when he was in the White House, when he was the president from 2016 to 2020, he actually said that he would like to buy Greenland. And that time, our prime minister said it was absurd, because Denmark is a very anti-Trump country. We're very liberal, very progressive. So all the media here are against Trump. They think he's a completely weirdo, and that, it's completely normal for journalists to sit and criticize him and just, really not hide that they are against him. So we hardly have any journalist or media in Denmark that would speak in favor of Trump or say anything positive. So of course, the Danish prime minister has a bias against Trump in many ways. She is a social democrat. She's not a conservative. So, when he said the other day that he would probably even go so far as using military or even economic force to get control over Greenland. I mean, he didn't actually say he just wanted control. He actually said he wanted to own Greenland. So of course it was like shock waves here in Denmark, and all the media were freaking out totally. And we had to discuss Greenland again, because normally Greenland is not something that Danish people are very focused on or very occupied with. And actually it turned out that a lot of media were focusing on that we have a kind of racism against Greenlanders, because when they come to Denmark, for instance, they often get very drunk because of their sort of biochemistry or their biology. It seems that as an ethnic group, they lack a kind of enzyme to break down alcohol. So it means you get very easily drunk when you are a Greenlander. So we have a lot of jokes about, Greenlanders being drunk in Copenhagen. And even the prime minister today admitted that she thought that there is a kind of racism against Greenlanders. But it was not a big problem, she said. So, what Trump said here, that he wanted to own Greenland, he wanted to make it a part of America, has really made us do some self-reflection. And now it turns out the prime minister last night, she had a meeting with all the political leaders of the political parties who are in parliament. And now, I mean, they are all up, very open to a dialogue with the US, because they start to realize that Denmark is too small a country. We have too few resources to be able to support Greenland. And Greenland is too small to be independent. I mean, there is only like 56,000 people living in Greenland. So they don't have the resources for their own economy. They cannot sustain themselves. They need a bigger country to help them. And everybody knows that. And of course, it would be a better deal for them to be under America, because America is so much bigger than Denmark, has much more resources, and could fund them much better than we do. So now, for the Danish government not to be in a very embarrassing situation, they need to come up with some political dialogue about how we could work together with the US to support Greenland so we don't lose it. And and also people are very shocked, because Trump is actually, or the United States is, our biggest ally within NATO, and Denmark is very dependent for security reasons on the United States. So let's say we have a deep conflict. It could be really a very, very dangerous situation for Denmark if we disagree with the United States over Greenland. So it's really a balance for our prime minister to still be kind of pleasing Trump, and yet, stick to the fact that Greenland should remain a part of Denmark. It's a very difficult situation.
Okay, well, you've now brought in about 4 or 5 theses and themes and issues: the United States' relationship to Denmark and to Greenland, but also to all of NATO, all of Europe, because Denmark is a member of NATO. And then I've got a picture of a map which I think is interesting. Can I put that on the screen here, Iben?
Yeah, sure.
This is an
Yeah.
unusual map. It's a little difficult to grasp at first glance because the entire Western Hemisphere, that's Canada, the United States, Mexico, and all of South America, are over the top of the map and on the other side. But this is the whole rest of the world. And we talked about this a bit yesterday. It's fascinating that Greenland, in some way, is a pivot point. If you go over the Arctic Circle and over the North Pole, it's Greenland, as it were, that's in a strategic position between the whole rest of the world, Asia, Europe, and Africa, and the Western Hemisphere, starting up there with Alaska and Canada at the top of the map. And then it shows two sea routes, which more or less circle what is called the world island by some geostrategists, that is Asia and Europe together. And those two routes are the southern route, which has always been used, which starts in Western Europe and goes down through the Straits of Gibraltar, through the Mediterranean Sea, through the Suez Canal, and then through the Red Sea, down around Saudi Arabia, across the Indian Ocean, south of India, then through Indonesia, and up to China. And that is the southern route that links the eastern and the western halves of what we call the Great World Island. Then the northern route has only been tried one time. In February 2021, a Russian tanker traversed this northern route for the first time ever. But it's thought that there might be in the future a possibility of using this northern route, and it's about 50% shorter. So it could be a tremendous shift in trade routes if this northern route became passable, if temperatures perhaps would rise a bit and the ice would be broken, or if they find some way to break through the ice. And that's a route that goes up around Kamchatka and then between Alaska and then the Russian, the eastern edge of Russia. And then it comes across all of the northern bound of Siberia. And then it comes down and finally then reaches Europe again from the northern side. How does this map strike you, Iben?
Well, first of all, I think what is the main concern is not only trading, but it's also security. Because right now we have, a lot of tensions with Russia. And if, let's say that Russia wants to launch some kind of war missile against the United States, it will go over Greenland. So the way to shoot it down or to prevent it from hitting America would be to have some defense, devices in Greenland. So for security reasons, it's very important to protect yourself against Russia and China for that sake as well. And also because there are a lot of resources within the Greenland soil, minerals and all sorts of things where you can produce a lot of things. I'm not really into the details. So it's also a matter of that Greenland actually could, provide some stuff that could make the country that is in charge of it very rich. So there are different things, but I think the main concern is actually, strategic when it comes to defense, in case of war or in case of that we're escalating the conflict with Russia.
Well,
So of course the United States and the Western world do not want Russia to control the area. They really want to be very present, and Denmark is too small now to be the one that should take care of all the security in the Arctic Circle. That's not possible. And I think the last couple of days, Denmark has realized that it's better for us to have some kind of deal with the United States. But maybe Trump is not satisfied with that. Maybe he wants actually to make Greenland part of the United States. Perhaps he wants another or an extra state so that Greenland will become the 51st or 53rd state. I don't know. So we have to see what is
Okay.
his next move, because we don't know. Right now, the Danish government is trying to, to reach out in a diplomatic way to find a kind of negotiation or a kind of new arrangement, new deal, where America could play a bigger role and could take, control or responsibility for the security reason without Denmark losing its tight bonds with Greenland, because actually we are united as one kingdom, even though that Greenland has some independency from the Danish government. They have their own sorts of government, but it's not everything that they can decide on their own. And also they get a lot of funding from Denmark every year, because
Yeah.
otherwise they could not, they could not survive, they could not sustain themselves.
Okay. So there's several issues still right in front of us, and one or two of these I can try to set forth. Trump has been elected in part because he was perceived as the peace candidate. Is that correct, do you think?
Yeah, everybody voted for him because, or one of the reasons why so many would like to voted for him and was in favor of him was because he didn't start any wars compared to all the neocons that was, constantly waging war, like
Mhm.
Bush, and even Obama. They were always, initiating wars.
Okay.
But I think I heard somebody said, well, maybe he didn't do that because now he has saved everything for the bigger war, which means war against Europe, war against
Okay.
another NATO ally. I don't know, but if Denmark is suddenly in a situation where he demands or he requires that he's going to own Greenland, then I think there's going to be a conflict.
Well, that's a quite surprising turn of events, and this only comes from Tuesday. Of course, he also mentioned that the United States would take back the Panama Canal, which is another major trade route. I don't have a picture of it right now, but we all know that trade between the east and west coast of the United States, and then between Asia and Europe, if you cross the Pacific, all passes through the Panama Canal because people don't want to go all the way around the end of South America. So it's as if the question of global trade and control of global trade routes, despite the fact that we're all using internet now and we're all using airplanes, nevertheless, these sea routes and the movement of the things that pass over the sea, whether it's oil or goods, are still very important. And these are the first maneuverings of this new presidency, which hasn't even started yet. And this idea that it would create a conflict with Denmark, a beautiful country, a traditionally Western ally, is sort of shocking. And the fact that you're from Denmark is kind of exciting to hear your personal view of this matter.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's very shocking because Denmark has always been what I would call the lapdog of the United States. Since the Second World War, we have been really very closely linked to the United States and seen them as our closest ally. And that he suddenly turned almost against us and say, give me Greenland, I want Greenland. It's, like our prime minister said, nobody could ever have imagined such a statement. So I think Trump, first of all, he's a businessman. And if you think that this would be a good deal for the United States, that's what he wants to do. So he wants to, enlarge or expand the United States for economical reasons. Okay, fair enough. But I also think, and I said that yesterday, that I have a feeling that he might be developing some kind of Napoleon, the French emperor, some kind of Napoleon complex, because Trump does not have to think about getting reelected now. He only has to be concerned about what the history books will write about him. And perhaps he has this vision or this egomania idea that he's going to be like an emperor that was expanding the United States and make it bigger. He says, make America great again, but it could also mean make America bigger again. So we don't really know so far what is his vision. And now, like I said before, he doesn't have to think about getting reelected. So he can probably do whatever he wants in a way.
Well, these are just opinions now. We're just chit-chatting. But it is interesting that in this period of history, the 2020s, the very idea of the old nation state is under question. It seems that the international corporations and the Starlink and the movement. I was just on an airplane the other day from Europe to America. Everyone is on the move. The airports are crowded. People from every country. And everyone is using the cell phones and the apps. And in a sense, we do have a global culture. And
Exactly.
and yet at the same time, there remains a desire to have a sense of home. I love to be in a place where I can sit in a breakfast spot, and the language I hear next to me is my own language, and the waiter or waitress speaks my language. But there's a kind of dissolution of that type of national identity, and yet at the same time a resurgence of it. So these are factors that may relate also to our faith, to our church. And you're a pretty astute observer of these things, and you've watched Europe closely, you've watched Russia closely, and you've watched the Catholic Church closely. So all of these things seem to be crisscrossing as we begin 2025. What are your and I did want to just also bring in something which is very important to me, because I have a son who's living out in Los Angeles, and I'm going to try to bring up a picture of what's happening in Los Angeles. And you may have heard.
I hope he's safe.
Well,
Bob.
he says he's safe, but the thing keeps spreading, and the winds are 40, 50 miles an hour. Let's see, what do I window? Here it is. Share. Look at this, Iben.
Yeah, it's really like apocalyptic scenes, right? Isn't it?
This is the northern part. LA is in the distance. This is Pacific Palisades or somewhere like that. I don't know exactly. But he lives more or less in the middle of those first line of more lit lights there, and he's trying to write beautiful scripts about.
There must be a lot of smoke
Yes,
over
yes.
LA now.
He said it's hard to breathe right now.
Wow.
Yeah, so I talked to him last night. I also just got a message that Mel Gibson's house has burnt. Mel Gibson has lost his house in Malibu, which is over on the right side of this picture. I got a message from a friend of his, and so
That's really terrible.
I
also saw today that Paris Hilton's house is burned to the ground.
So we sympathize. I think there's something on the order of, well, there's 180,000 people who have been evacuated, I believe, but this is continuing. It seems to still be expanding, and there's thousands and thousands of homes that have been burnt to the ground.
But do you think there is any danger that it could spread to LA, the city itself?
I do. I do. The winds pick up cinders. They go not just 10 or 20 feet, they go half a mile. And then
do you see any kind of reference to the Bible here, or some kind of events that is pointing towards some kind of sign of the times, or what?
I don't know what to think. I've been astonished by the trajectory of my country for the past 50 years. And, I thought of America as a great and good, generous country. But we also are very attached to making money, and sometimes obsessively so that our God becomes the dollar. And we've become immoral in many ways. We're not as dignified as we once were. And I don't know if God punishes us, or this is just an act of nature.
Well, you could say that perhaps we are punishing ourselves, because like what goes out of the earth will return to the earth. And I mean, we are going to burn up in our own crimes in a way, because I mean, you can't break God's law, but God's law can break you. So it means that if you don't follow God's law, I mean, there will be consequences even within nature. The medieval mystic Hildegard of Bingen, she has a very interesting statement, and I used a quote once for one of my writings, and she's actually saying that whenever people are committing sins, nature will react in convulsions, and it will, get aggressive, and terrible things, nature catastrophes will happen because of sinfulness of man. And the first thing I thought about when I saw these, it's like hell. I mean, now with all the flames, it really looks like hell on earth, and people losing everything they have. I think about Hollywood, because Hollywood has spread so much evil, so much filth, and has destroyed several generations with their false ideas about what is love, what you could call the Hollywood heresy, that you just had to, when you meet there's so many Hollywood movies, even though they are romantic movies and love stories, actually is promoting promiscuity and disorder in marriage, all sorts of things. And we heard everybody who was on Twitter would hear the stories about pedophiles running Hollywood and all the crimes against children. I don't know whether this is true or not, but there is all these rumors, and I guess a lot of your viewers would know these rumors, because if you go to any social media, you would read posts on that. So I can't help thinking about whether it's our own sinfulness that nature reacts against. It's not really the wrath of God, but it's just nature turning against us because of our sinfulness.
Eben, those are disturbing and provocative words, and they're almost words that cause us to pray that we reform and repent. This has happened throughout history. We know that when we head down the wrong path, we should turn around. A lot of us, just keep going until finally we're destroyed. But if it is an addiction, or if there's just some bad choices, there's probably the center of the Christian faith is the concept of turning and being redeemed. Repent and return, and the Lord has his arms open. And anything can be therefore perceived as a sign, as a call for us to rethink where we're going and what our priorities are.
Yeah, you could, I mean, you can say, okay, this is just a coincidence. It always happened that sometimes, forests just, catch fire. But you could also see it as a believer, you could see it as a sign of nature, turning against us because of our sins. At least that is what Hildegard of Bingen claims, that this can happen, that nature simply reacts to the sinfulness of man. And I actually think we are at a point in this world where so much evil is being promoted everywhere. Evil things, no love, just really pure evil.
Well,
So maybe this is a sign for us from nature that we should repent. And I would say, when Notre Dame in Paris, the big cathedral in Paris, caught fire some years ago, I actually made a video about this. Was a kind of warning, a wake-up call to France, who has completely rejected their Catholic faith for many years, and now it has been restored, and that's good. But I think we cannot help as human beings to try to look for a sign in catastrophes like this. I think it's really part of the human mindset that we look for a kind of meaning or an understanding of whether there is a link between something we did or something that happened and then a kind of catastrophe like this. I think it's totally normal. I think human beings has always done that.
So we have over 100 people watching us right now, Eben, and of course we thank all of you for following us and for putting up with us. Yesterday we had terrible problems with our connectivity. We seem to be okay today, but we're a small operation, but we're trying to grow, and we appreciate your support thus far. If you like us, you could click that button where the thumb goes up, and maybe share and tell other people there is such a video. And Eben and I will be trying to continue I think, weekly, won't we be, Eben, if we can?
Yes, sure.
And
That would be really nice to do that.
okay, if we have John B., one of the people watching, says the Globe Awards Sunday, so just 5 days ago, mocked the Catholic Church, the Pope, and then came the fires. So he sees a connection. Thank you, John. And he does put this next remark up, Genesis, the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, chapter 18, verse 26. And the Lord said to him, if I find in Sodom 50 just within the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Thank you, John, for giving us that. He says, he also says Trump's vision seems supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if at times the political, the spiritual uh, are in some sort of double helix. They weave a pattern and aren't completely separate. I think we've tried to make things separate in a way and just be very pragmatic and practical in our
Well,
politics. Mm.
because of technology, actually, one leader today could, get the world dominion and just rule the world. It's not impossible because of technology that you can simply govern the whole world. And with Trump's idea about, how fantastic he is, I wouldn't be surprised if he dreams about, controlling the whole world, uh, because he's very good at telling us how fantastic he is. Whenever, he's talking about his achievements, he's always boasting about himself. He has very little humility in my understanding of his personality, but maybe I'm wrong, but this is just the way I see him. And I think it's very dangerous because, as you said before, national states are kind of disintegrating, and we're seeing this global world order, on the rise. And what would be the outcome of it? And would there be anywhere you can live outside this global world order if you don't agree with it? I'm not sure, and this is very dangerous. And then we're back to the biblical warnings about the end of times. I don't know, because probably people have always been thinking about whether now was the end of times, because when Jesus was risen, and he ascended into heaven, St. Paul thought he would come back very soon. So far he didn't. So it's hard to say, but I just think that right now with the technology and the apostasy from the Christian church everywhere, and these leaders who seems to have a vision for new empires. I don't know where that would lead us.
I read an article this morning on the website Stilum Curiae of Marco Tossati, and an Italian writer says he doesn't find our church today acting like the bride of Christ and concentrating on her bridegroom, on the love of Christ. It was a central part of the Catholic tradition, as it is in many of the evangelical Protestant churches, to focus on Jesus. And yet we now are focusing on humanitarian concerns and social concerns and the needs of different groups in the church. The classic height of the Christian faith is the prayer of thanksgiving and adoration toward the divine Jesus, whose passion and death saved the world. This is the center of the liturgy, it's the center of contemplation, it's the center of religious life, but it doesn't seem to be a very central part of the church's teaching today. That's what this man wrote. How does that strike you?
I think that's absolutely true. The problem is that we're too busy to save the world and not to save souls.
Okay.
I also see here in Hungary, within the Christian conservative political movements, it's very much about worldliness. It's about saving the culture. Yeah, sure. I mean, we should try to keep our culture a Christian civilization, but Christ never told us to save the culture. He told us to follow him and to expect persecution.
Oh,
And I actually think that many Christians today have become too sort of, what would you say, compliant with the world. They just want to have a nice time in the world. They want to have success, and they want to have political careers, things like that. And I understand that, but if there is no kind of idea about that the church, like you said, is actually the bride of Christ, and we should focus on following him no matter what is the cost, and whether the world loves us or hates us, I mean, then you will see the church being weakened, and this is what we all are experiencing right now. And I think the church should really stand up against a lot of things in our time, instead of trying to please and adapt when it comes to climate change and the LGBT movement and all these things. Church should stand up and talk about the eternal truths, not about the temporal conflicts. Or, of
oh,
course, the church, I mean, the church has always been a kind of, has always tried to have some ethics concerning society, and I think, of course, the church should still have that. But right now we're in a spiritual war against evil, and I think now it takes a lot of, going back to the eternal truths and the sacraments and devotional life, and not so much the political life.
okay, I agree with you, Eben. We have one viewer, Chesty Marine. Pope Francis has turned out to be quite the catastrophe in his own right. Actually, right should be Right. I somehow have an addiction to proofreading texts because for 30 plus years I've put out a magazine, and there's always a typo. So I don't mind you make a typo, but right means a ritual. So the word is Right in this case, Chesty. Okay, he is splitting the church, and and has to know this. So many challenges, it seems. So it seems you took this picture of the fire and the burning of northern Los Angeles as a metaphor also for a fire in the church, in a sense, which is about to burn us into two parts. We've had an excommunication last summer of a wonderful Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, very orthodox in his teaching, but critical and very condemning of Pope Francis. At the same time, we're all concerned that if we separate from Peter, we will be somehow internally destroying the witness and even the integrity of the Catholic Church. Seems to be the great problem we face. Eben, you had some thoughts on this the other day when we were chatting.
I don't think it's only Pope Francis who's splitting the church. I think Catholics are doing that as well, because there are a lot of disobedient Catholics for the time being. People who think that they know better than the church, and they know what is orthodoxy. And I think that's a big problem, because this is actually a Protestant way of thinking. It's a Protestant approach. And I know that a lot of conservative Catholics get really upset with me when I mention that. But I will keep doing it anyway, because I am a convert and I come from Protestantism and I know what it is. And Catholics should be really careful right now, because we have had a lot of bad popes in history, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, because we still believe that Christ is the head, and he would deal with that accordingly. We have had even worse popes than Pope Francis is, if you think he's a bad pope. But the thing is that what is the essential thing of the Catholic faith is obedience. And it means that you stick to the church that Christ founded, no matter what you think of the leader. You're not trying to make your own idea about what the church should be and then split the church. So I think it's not, I'm not talking about blind obedience, because we still have our conscience and we can still reflect on what we think is right or wrong. But still, if people do not like, or Catholics are not in favor of their Pope, they should live a more holy life themselves, and they should pray a lot more for the Holy Father, instead of, turning the Catholic church into a political party, because that's what we're doing right now. We think that the Catholic Church is just like a democracy, and you can just, criticize your leader, and then probably you can get rid of him, or you can start a new party yourself. And that's a very, very dangerous thing for the Catholic Church, because this is exactly what the devil wants.
Okay.
The devil is playing around with these very, I would say conservative Catholics that think they're on the right side, and Pope Francis is the bad pope. He might have flaws as a pope, but he is the pope no matter what. And obedience is very important. It's very, very important that we stick to the fact that our faith has to do with obedience. And I see a lot of people who think it's right now, the right way to be a Catholic is to be disobedient. And I know I'm going to create a storm now of people who disagree with me, but I think it's very important, because if the Catholic Church breaks now into two parts, a very conservative part where Vigano would be the Pope, and then we have, the other part of the church led by Pope Francis, then we're done. It's a catastrophe to divide the body of Christ even further on, because we already have divided it into three parts: the Orthodox, the Protestants, and the Catholics. So I think we should stay united.
Well, I have a number of thoughts right now. I can't even get them all straight in my mind. I just wrote my last editorial for the magazine asking Pope Francis and Archbishop Vigano to try to find a way to be reconciled, because I find it a scandal that the church has got two sort of wings now that are slowly developing into two churches. It says in the creed that we confess, that when we say the rosary, when we go to church, every mass, I believe in God the Father Almighty. And it says in one, that's not two, it's not three, it's one. One holy, it's not unholy. It's holy insofar as it holds to the Holy Spirit. That doesn't mean that every person is always without sin, of course. One holy, Catholic, universal, that's everywhere in the world, and apostolic, connected back to the first pure teaching of the apostles, who received it from Christ himself. This is what we profess. We must remain one. However, you can't go along with evil, and you can't go along with heresy. And the word you used a minute ago was obedience. I almost would prefer the word fidelity. In this sense, if someone tells me to do something that I'm sure is wrong, I cannot be required to do it. In conscience and in Christian morality, I have to say I must disobey, because what you are asking for is evil. On the other hand, if I'm going to be faithful to the Pope, even when he says something that seems not to be in keeping with our tradition, seems to be opening to certain worldliness, I can still remain faithful to him and call him back to become the Pope or the person he was intended by God to be, and say, Holy Father, I still am obedient to you in the most profound way, even when I disagree with you on this point. Does that make any sense?
Well, all these Catholics who are upset with Pope Francis, who's going to stop them from living holy lives? We have the magisterium, we have the teachings of the church, we have the sacraments. Nobody's going to stop them living more holy lives. So why are they so occupied with what Pope Francis does? We still have the teachings of the church. Everybody knows what it takes to live a holy life. Nobody's going to stop you from praying all day, to do fasting, to do prayers, to help other people. Nobody's going to stop you. So I don't think we should be so overly focused on what the Pope is saying, because we know, of course, that the gates of hell will try to prevail against the church. So, we don't solve that problem by getting upset and angry, but only by living more holy lives.
All right.
But the problem is that now Catholics regard the Catholic Church as a political party, where they will have to be able to vote for the leader and follow the leader. Well, we have had bad bishops and bad popes before, and the way the church survived was by holy Catholics who were obedient to the magisterium, to the teachings of the church, and carried on. Just carry on. I mean, don't think about Pope Francis. Just carry on as a Catholic.
Okay, that's what this person, A. Morgan, writes, and why I put this up a few seconds ago. Pope Francis has named a cardinal, McElroy. He's from San Diego. He's named McElroy, who was a friend of McCarrick, former Cardinal McCarrick, to head up the Washington, D.C. diocese as a direct opposition to Trump. So what this viewer is saying is, inside the church, there are political choices made, even in such situations as choosing the successor to the retiring Cardinal of Washington, just on the eve of Trump's becoming the president in Washington, and choosing a man who's fairly critical of many of the positions that Trump holds. What do you make of such a...
Yeah, it comes from Taylor Marshall and his podcast, because I've seen that now this whole story comes from Taylor Marshall, which is very, very political. And again, you see everything through the lights of politics. So what if Pope Francis has decided to put him there? It doesn't stop you, like I said before, being, a Catholic who's living a holy life. But again, we're going to be upset about the church, and we're doing much more damage to the church by being so extremely occupied with these politics. I mean, just okay, this is the Pope decided that, and that's it. There's nothing you can do about it. So what are you going to do? You can just, pray more. You can fast more. You can do what Catholics has been doing for centuries. But there's nothing you can do about Pope Francis' decision.
Well,
and
this is
the more and I mean, the more upset you become about it, the more you regard the Catholic Church as another political party, and I think that's totally wrong.
Well, this viewer, A. Morgan, responds to you already, even in this sense. We are focusing on what that is Pope Francis, is saying, because he influences the world and is leading souls astray, because we love our fellow man. So that is his...
Honestly, I think Pope Francis is not leading any souls astray who doesn't want to be led astray. But I think people are leading themselves astray by being so upset with everything that the Pope does. I actually think they should support the Holy Father, and I think they should pray more for him. And I think they should, become even more Catholic in their lifestyle. I don't think it's going to help Pope Francis at all and the church that we're so critical towards him.
Okay, so you're really presenting a position which is this: the office of the Pope is of such importance to the life of the church, who is the spouse of Christ, that it will be destabilized and lose somehow its identity if we, against Francis, or even against another pope like John Paul II, perhaps, when he kissed the Quran. People were very upset about that. Not so much asking that he be removed or resign. We did have Benedict, who was criticized more by the left, and they said he can't be a good pope because he's so traditional. He's opening up to the old mass. And finally, he resigned. He was, in a sense, chased out of office, at least in part. Now we have Francis. So you're concerned that the politicization of the church loses that sense of the Pope as the father, even if he's on some occasions, a father who makes a bad decision. He remains the father. So
exactly.
You're calling on people to recall that, because you're very concerned that it's actually increasing, this desire to split the church and
exactly,
to change.
because I mean, one of the biggest or most important things about the Pope is he's the sign of unity. And since we are, so upset with him, we are pushing for the division. And that division comes from the devil. Division comes from the devil, doesn't come from God. And the papacy and the Pope is the sign of unity. So if we think that the Pope is on the wrong track, or he's leading us astray, we as the lay people have the responsibility to bring him back by our love for him and living Catholic lives, praying for him, not acting like people who are dissenting or are trying to make more divisions. It's not going to help the church.
Well, we've got another scribbler, 007. I'm not sure if he's some type of secret agent. But my morning prayers includes praying and asking our saintly popes in heaven for their intercession. What do you think of that?
Well, to be I think that's good, but I think to be a Catholic is to have confidence in the magisterium of the church. And if you have this idea that you cannot trust any leader in the church, and we know better ourselves, and we need like other people to tell us what's right, and other bishops. So we have this kind of turbulence inside the church because you don't have any confidence anymore in the teachings of the Pope or his magisterium. Then you're not a Catholic anymore, because a Catholic means to be to respect and to regard the papacy as kind of central, and that you're obedient to the magisterium. And if you're disobedient and you have your own idea about what the Catholic Church should be right now, you're Protestant. I mean, you're not a Catholic anymore. So a lot of these people are going into a kind of Protestant direction, which I'm concerned about.
Well, I wanted to bring this picture back up. You asked me at the beginning not to go beyond an hour. So we're ending our program now. But this fire in Los Angeles, I also think is symbolic of the fire in the church. We're on fire. People have left by the millions. People are preparing to leave by the millions. We've seen the Protestant Reformation 500 years ago. We didn't see it ourselves, but we've all known the effects of it. We've seen 1,000 years ago the tremendous break, the Great Schism, 1054, between the East and the West. We were brothers, and we are now somehow for 1,000 years suspicious and uncertain. We've been trying for the last 100 years to get to reconcile. This fire is a devouring fire, and it's threatening that city that in the distance, if the winds blow it. This fire that started in the Catholic Church now could conceivably devour the unity of our church. We could say, I'm not a Roman Catholic, I'm a traditional Catholic, or I'm not a Francis Catholic, I'm a Latin Mass Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we end this program by somehow praying or reflecting on this fire that's in the church and what we may be trying to do in our lives and in our podcast during the rest of this year in this regard.
Absolutely, let's do that.
Why don't you make one last remark then about or
Yeah,
appeal?
but I mean, it seems to me there is this great havoc and uphealing of things. But Christ said when he returned to the earth, will he found any faith? I mean, and maybe we are living in a very faith-less age, and maybe he will find very little faith when he returns, because this is our generation. We have been, in this apostasy for generations now, and so I think we're burning up in our own crimes in a way. God's mercy is still there, but maybe people's hearts are so hardened that they're not open to it anymore. And this is a possibility. And Catholics regard now the Catholic Church as a political party. And I just really want to warn against that. I mean, no matter if you like the Pope or not, I think obedience is extremely important. For instance, Padre Pio, when he was told not to celebrate Mass, he did not criticize any authorities. He just kept silent and waited because he was obedient. Padre Pio, which is a really great saint, he didn't start to criticize the Pope or the bishops that didn't want to have him celebrate Mass because he thought that his stigmata was a fraud or whatever. He was under in some kind of investigation, and he just really was very patient, and he waited, and he didn't say anything. And I think we have to look to Padre Pio actually, because he did not create a big fuss out of all that.
All right. I agree with you, Iben, and I agree with the viewers who feel very concerned about our present situation. there is a fire. It's been lit. There's many modernists and sort of post-Christian thinkers. There's many people who are very conservative. I pray also for them, and also that they be charitable, because the church is a mystery. And if we treat it purely as something that we fully understand and can sort of control ourselves, I think that's a lack of faith as well. And I myself have spent many, many years in Rome. I'm very concerned with everything I see, and it's important that I express the fact that the church must be something greater than a human institution and than human errors and human fights. It's greater. It's the presence of Christ still in the world, his mystical body. Somehow it's this we must remember, and we must try to keep that body venerated, honored, respected, and do the best we can in our parishes, in our communities, in our families. And Iben, I appreciate your witness as a convert and as a kind of valiant Viking. You're an inspiration to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Join us on pilgrimage in 2024. This August, we are in Spain and France, Garabandal to Lourdes. September, we head to Mexico, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and we learn about the Flower World Prophecy. October, we return to Andalusia, Spain with Father Murr for a retreat and pilgrimage, and we end the year in Italy, Christmas in Rome for the beginning of the Jubilee year. We have a few seats left on each pilgrimage. Be sure to sign up now, and we hope